So excellent. Just to start off, I'll be popping in and out in terms of audio. I'll be here. Thank you so much for volunteering your time to talk to us for this brief crash course into the narrative pipeline in free-to-play mobile games. Like that means a lot. And yeah, like I said, floor is yours. Um, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. Well, you can see me now, and I'm going to share my screen afterwards, so then you'll be seeing the screen. So I'll just introduce myself while you're still seeing me. Yeah, my name is Jedidjah. I am a writer and narrative designer from originally the Netherlands, Amsterdam. I'm currently in France for work, but I mainly work, well, basically all over Europe. I've worked in several countries, and obviously, I also do work remotely. I have a lot of experience in a lot of different countries and a lot of different games. Um, I started out in theater and movies originally, but went into game development about 10 years ago. And although at the moment I also work for PC and consoles, main part of my work has been in mobile and mobile free to play, which is the reason why I'm here today to explain you about that, because the narrative design and writing pipeline for mobile and especially mobile free to play games is very different from a lot of other processes. And I think it would be interesting to explain you a bit about those differences and how to tackle that. Feel free to ask questions anytime they pop up. Don't be afraid to interrupt me or put it in the chat, or just put on your microphone and interrupt me. That's all totally fine. Um, I'll just share my screen and we'll go through all of it. Let's see. This should be the right one. Yeah, can you all see that one? I'm going to do this.
Yep,
That
I
should
see.
also still work. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna move you to the side. Yeah. Well, this is what I sort of already explained to you. Writer, narrative designer. I've got 8 mobile games shipped for which I was writer or lead writer. And there's 2 more on the way. I do a lot of story development and advice as well, so hence my ability to also explain this to you. I'm an advisor for the Flemish Gamefund. Flemish, that's Belgium, which I am not from, but they speak the same language originally as I do, so that's why I can advise them. And I'm a programmer for the Imagine Film Festival, which is a film festival all about science fiction, horror, and fantasy. And they have interactive stuff as well, and I help with that. And here you can see some images from games I worked on, and every image that you'll see in this presentation is also from mobile stuff I worked on. Next one. Yeah. So, story-driven mobile free-to-play genres. What are we talking about in this crash course? Well, um, what's important? Obviously, the mobile game realm is big, and there are a lot of narrative mobile games, premium games. We're talking today about free to play, um, because that is a whole different pipeline. And there are official explanations of what free to play exactly is. But for this moment, I'm going to just describe it as ongoing games that get continuous updates, because that's what's important for what I'm talking about. Um, it's games that are online, that are free to play, that are on your mobile phone, and basically they're free, but you will be enticed to actually start paying money halfway through. You don't have to. but you can. More on that later. And the continuous updates, almost all free to play games have that, where you'll have to update um, several times in a year to make sure that the content stays fresh and new, because you want to keep people in the game. So you basically you don't finish the game. Um, I've noted here three basic genres that are mostly made and used. The first one is the choice-based graphic novels. So basically, well, Choices is one of the best titles in that regard, where you have a graphic novel and you can choose between options, choose what you want to do. And what often happens in those stories is that eventually the best choice will be the premium choice that you actually have to pay for. Then the second one is match three management games, anything like that, gameplay wise, that has dialogue in static images, like you see the image below that, which is from a game called Solitaire Mystery. Um, and then you have the same kind of games that have actually animated cutscenes in between. So not just the static images or the small movements, but real fully animated free to play genres that I'm talking about today. There are more, but these are most relevant for my discussion. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so how to start? This is a bit of a weird one, maybe, but like I said, everything is from a narrative and writing point of view. Um, what basically happens in these mobile games is, well, either you start with the story or you don't. And that sounds a bit weird. I mean, if you think about, for instance, story driven AAA games, I think you've had a crash course on that before as well. Um, you would never start that without knowing a story. Um, but in these free to play games, because the game mechanic is the basic thing for it that has to pull your players in and keep them playing. And because those gameplay types are so clear, match 3 is like the best example of this, where basically every match 3 game is the same. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, it's just that's the gameplay is so clear that there is like only one way to do it with little tiny differences. So if you make a mobile free to play game, it is very well possible that you start out, even though you know you want it to be story driven, that you still start out by designing it, making it, and testing it without having the gameplay, the story in there, just having the gameplay. This actually happens a lot because it takes a long time to develop a story and to write it, and you want to have like your gameplay funnel the right way. So there's nothing wrong with doing it like that. I've worked on both kinds of games where either you start with the story beforehand. The one you see on the right side there, Fabulous Angela, New York to LA, is one of those games where the story is really the thing that starts it. But I've worked on a lot of games as well that have the other way around, where there's like, okay, this is um, where this story takes place. These are the characters. These are like sort of the story surroundings. And now we've built the levels, we've tested them, we see that it works, we see that people like our animation style, and now we're going to put in the story. So both work. Um, and like I already mentioned, because it's free to play and because it means money comes first, um, you want to test that gameplay because you want to keep your players hooked. And yes, you can do that with the narrative. Um, but the narrative has to serve that free to play model. Obviously, in all cases, in any game you make, you want to make money. But for free to play, developing and designing it is always about um, getting enough players in. It's mobile, so it's also very competitive. And then getting your players eventually to spend some money on your game. And there is nothing wrong with that because we all want to make money. Um, you can have discussions about how far you want to go into that free to play model and into getting that money from your players. But that's a whole different discussion. I think that there are some ethical lines that you have to think about. But that's not what we're talking about today. In general, money comes first, makes a lot of sense. And that also means that the story has to serve that free to play model. Don't forget, like, if you write AAA, um, people pay money and they have the game and they start the game. And the worst thing that can happen is that after 2 hours of playing, they don't like it, but they've already paid the $60, which is the same when going like to the movies or whatever. Um, so you can sort of be a bit more edgy. In free to play, if your players don't come back to your game, they won't spend money. So you need to make sure they come back again and again and again. And your story has to do that as well. So think about like soap operas, stuff like that. Those are also written to make sure that the viewer comes back every day and sees what's going to happen next. So if you want to write story for the free to play model, there's a couple of things that you need to think about. It's bite-sized chunks, so make sure that your story is in small parts. Don't make it too long; people will want to skip it. Um, which is fine. Some people don't like story in there at all, but most players do. So make sure it's bite size, make sure they like it and they enjoy it. But the next level they have to play comes fast as well, because that's eventually what they're in for. Use cliffhangers and story promises. So basically, this is what I said about the soap opera kind of thing. If you have a cliffhanger, if you have a story promise, if you know something will happen later on, if you end a cutscene on a great cliffhanger, and then the player has to, for instance, play 10 more levels to get to the next step of the story. Um, that means that your players will keep on playing, and that's what you want. And that could also mean that your players might want to pay a little bit of money to get to the next part of the story fast. Because if you have to play 10 levels in between, and those 10 levels, like if you, for instance, in a lot of match three games, you will have like um, about three times you can try it, and if you don't get it, you have to wait for a while, or you can pay and just continue playing. Well, that's what you want. So if that's what you want, make sure you have that cliffhangers in the story so people want to go to there. um, Keep it simple for a broad international audience. That's also something that I learned while writing. It's great to be able to express yourself in English very well, but a lot of those games don't get localized in a lot of languages, which means that a lot of people will play your games who aren't native English, or maybe native French or German or whatever basic languages you have in there. Um, so make sure you keep the words that you use fairly simple. Like, you don't have to write as if it's for like a 6-year-old, but as soon as you start using a lot of difficult words, difficult terms, sentences that are too long, you might lose part of your international audience. And the thing about free to play mobile games is that they're like playable for a really broad international audience. So check what words you use and if it's understandable for a lot of people. Next thing, check what's popular. This is also, it makes sense. You want to make sure that a lot of people play it. And that means that free to play game developers will not just think about which game genres are popular, but also which storylines are popular. Like, for instance, I can assure you that what's that series called at the moment? Netflix. Bridgerton, yeah, Bridgerton. That was like, I don't know if it's a hit where you're at, but I've seen people from all over the world talking about that. Um, it's for women. It's for a younger audience. I'm pretty sure that there's like 50 companies around the world now trying to make a free to play game that is in that same vein, because it's something that people tap into at this moment. And again, that's great. But you have to think about the long term possibilities, because if you go with something that is temporarily popular, your story could grow old fast and your game could be less successful, because for free to play, you want your game to be playable for a long time. So that's the next one. Design a story that could go on forever. So basically, again, soap operas, but also think about like procedural police series, stuff like that. Make sure you have a lot of characters in there, for instance, or you have a story that has promise but doesn't end on something big. So you can build and build and build and build, because if you do updates, you build more levels, people want to play more levels, they want more story. So you need to be able to write a lot of storylines and never grow tired of it. The image you see next to this is from a choices based game that is taking place in a hospital. Well, that's another wonderful place where you can always design storylines. So think about something that you can use for a long time. And finally, check the App Store guidelines. Again, talking about the hospitals, um, app stores, especially Apple, tend to change their guidelines every now and then. With one of the games I worked on, we had a scare at one time when all of a sudden they said like, "Oh, you can't show like operations and stuff like that, even if it's just easily drawn." If you're making free to play and you've designed a story that you think you're going to build on for like 2, 3, 4, 5 years, make sure you have something that isn't um, liable to changing app store guidelines, because that could just break your whole business case, basically. And that's often something that, like in imagery, you can change that. Like for instance, if you can't have blood, you can just paint over it. But if your story is not within the guidelines, you have a much bigger problem. Okay, I'm just rushing through it. There's much more to tell you, obviously, but well, it's a crash course. So, okay, next thing, connecting story and gameplay. So I've just rushed through like what's the thing you have to think about when you do free to play. Connecting story and gameplay is a big one, and again, I'm using Match3 as an example. I've actually not worked in Match3 that much, but it is one of the gameplay types in free to play that is most often used, and also one that's one of the hardest to connect story and gameplay with. Which is because Match3, um, the whole the gameplay technical thing that you do as a player doesn't have any story. It's just matching up things, and you now have also like the combining stuff. I know that's different, but let's call that match three as well at the moment, just to make it easy. Like anything where you have to match is not something that has a storyline in it already, because it's really hard to think of something where matching up stuff is a story. So, how are you going to connect your story to the gameplay? Um, there are a lot of things you can do. There are a couple of things you might not want to do. But let's start with the beginning. What are the achievements for the player? Because that's where the story goes. Um, Designing a story, narrative design is all about giving those thrills to your players and rewarding them. Um, Storytelling is about rewarding the player, is about rewarding the viewer if you do like film and TV. Um, and in order to reward them, you need to know what they want to achieve. And the example here I put here is match three games will have story content around upgrades, not around play levels. So think of games like Gardenscape, Homescapes, that kind of game, where the gameplay is match three, but with the match three, you earn money, and that money you can use to upgrade stuff. And the upgrading is like redecorating your house, redecorating your garden, stuff like that. So the actual achievement and the thing that you could use actual money for, like your own pocket money that you put into the game, is the upgrade. Now, that's why the story content for a match 3 game in that case is about the upgrades. So it's not around the play levels. You don't do like story and then you play one level of match 3 and then you get another part of the story. No, the story is going to be, I want to upgrade this for this and this and this reason. So I need to do the match 3 so I can get the upgrade and continue with the story. Um, Another example is from the game that you just saw an image of, the Solitaire mystery game that I've been writing, um, where you have to play solitaire and solve crimes. Now, this is like sort of in between because the solitaire is within the room that you are investigating, but you can't do it literally. You can't say like, I'm going to solve this crime, and in order to do so, I'm going to go to the crime scene and I'm going to play solitaire, and then I'm solving it. So the solitaire cards that you see in the level are actually um, sort of as if you're investigating. So you're picking up cards, but picking up cards is the investigation. Um, you don't have to explain that because otherwise it will be weird. Otherwise, I will have to write like, there's again a lot of cards here. Well, let's pick them up. Oh, this is like the fourth murder scene I've been to, and everywhere there's cards. I mean, that would be like 500 levels of just one weird serial killer leaving cards everywhere. Um, so yeah, um, achievements. That's where the story goes. I've skipped the second one. I just went to the third one. Like, is the gameplay not storyfiable? Don't even try. So that's what I just said about making sure that you don't start explaining why there's cards on the murder scene. Um, do make the art match the story objects. You can see that again in match three games, where if you have to upgrade a garden, the match three things will be garden stuff, or at least have the same kind of style. You can use your characters visually during gameplay. You've seen a lot of match three games that you'll have like the image of the main character somewhere, and sometimes they might say, "Oh yeah, well done," something like that. That's all fine, but don't worry about making a story out of the core gameplay. Going back to what I put in between there, do you need animated cutscenes or not? Um, it's partly a money issue because animated cutscenes are more expensive to make. Um, but you also have to think from a narrative design point of view. Um, if you have animated cutscenes, apart from the way it looks and whether it might upgrade your game in style, um, you have to think about whether you actually need them for the interactions. Because if you have a game that is basically in the storylines just people talking to each other in making animated cutscenes, because what then will happen is that you have it all animated, but it's still two characters just standing still and talking to each other. And I can tell you from experience and also from a lot of research that has been done, the players don't specifically care about that. And that is to say, I'm not saying they don't care about animations or whatever, because players will like that. But the experience in a free to play mobile game is totally different because players want little bits of story, but they want to continue playing as well. And they can sort of see through it, even if they don't always know it themselves. If they um, see animated cutscenes, but nothing really happens, they get tired of it faster than when you have just the images with the text balloons. So you really need to think about that. You can also do a combination. One of the games that I've been helping on lately, called Delicious World, is a really good example. I think I have an image later on, where they have the gameplay, because it's a management game, kitchen management. So the gameplay is animated. You see the character moving about. And then the cutscenes are not entirely animated, but every like 4 or 5 levels, there will be a cutscene that has animation, which is always a cutscene in which something physically happens. So they choose to use animations when it really matters and have them in the same style as the images that are used for just the text balloons. So the style stays the same, and you really use those animations for something that is often funny, because a lot of interactions in these kind of stories are funny. And if you have the animation for movement, you can make a really funny scene. Lots more to discuss about that, but I'm just keeping it for here. Back to this. Yeah. Connecting gameplay and story doesn't mean you can't think past your first association. Not everything has to be about building and redecorating. I just mentioned like homescapes and gardenscapes. There are like lots of games like that out there. A lot of them are great and great fun, and they're all about building and decorating, and that's fine. Storyline as well. But if you are interested in making a game like that for mobile, um, do think past that first idea, because I think there are more things you can do with that, and you could just maybe make the next great thing while still keeping that gameplay intact. So try and be creative about this. And I'm mentioning this because I've often spoken to new free to play game developers who were like, oh, we're doing totally different. We have something entirely different. And then it was sort of just the same, but with another main character, which is fine because they turn into great games. But if you really want to do something different, then go for it. If you don't, stick to the building and redecorating or whatever and make that a great game. But try to think of if you want to do it differently, how you can maybe build a different story around building. And last but not least, don't forget your storytelling mix, cutscenes, tutorials, incentives. So basically, you will have your storylines, you will have cutscenes, either animated or not, in between levels or in between upgrades. Um, or you'll just have a visual novel with choices. That's no cutscenes. You have tutorials, you have incentives like I mentioned, like have that character image saying like, "Oh, well done" or whatever. Um, in free to play, there's a lot more you can do with that, more than in like traditional PC or even console games, because there's more possibility of mixing up those tutorials, cutscenes, and stuff like that. And it's great to play with that because that ups the engagement of your players, and that's what you want. You want to engage them. Okay, moving on. Almost there. How to write and design. This is a nice header to use as if I'm gonna fix this in like a one page. But I'm gonna try to give you some pointers. This image is World, by the way, what I the game I just mentioned. I can really recommend looking at that one to see how they mix everything up. I think it's a great example. Yeah, how to write and design. Content. You need a lot. Is the first time that thing I mentioned. This is a common problem that I find as a writer or narrative designer. I get called by mobile developers a lot, saying like, "Oh yeah, this is what we're doing, and now all we need is the storyline. So can you write it?" And then when they realize that they need more content, which is also gonna mean a lot more money, um, it often stops there. Especially new companies or companies who think they can cash in on making like a copy of a successful mobile game. They don't realize how much content is needed. And that's not just the content for one game, but think about, for instance, the Choices app. If you don't know it, look it up online. It's basically um, a visual novel with choices in there, and it's stories, just basic stories. But to keep your players engaged, you need a lot of those stories. So, like I've been writing a couple of years ago for a company who also tried to do this, and they had three main storylines. So you had three books to choose from. And that wasn't enough because your players will just rush through them and then they need more. And if you can't provide that content, they will leave your game and go to another game. So you need a lot of pages, a lot of words. Don't underestimate this. Even if your story part is lower than a lot of other mobile games, you will still need more than you think you need, and you need a constant supply of that. Study existing games, but design your own. I think this is also what I just mentioned. Like, um, there's a lot of copying out there, and it makes sense because, especially in mobile free to play, there's a lot of uh, work done on um, how do I engage my players and what works. And it makes a lot of sense to study what works and then copy that. But eventually, you do see that the games that have their own design and have that original idea behind it, quite often also in the storyline, um, they are eventually the games that are there to stay, and the copies often stay like a year and then they go. So do study them, but design your own. Be honest about your originality. this is also what I already mentioned. Like, it's fine if you are inspired by what's already there. You don't have to be like, oh, I found out like this is the new best thing, when it's basically just another version of what's already there. There's enough room. Just go for it and try. If the format is strong, you don't need in-house writers per se. This is an important one. You can have a lot of discussions on whether you need writers to be part of your core team, to be in-house, or um, working from home, but in your company, working the same business hours every day. Um, if you're developing something entirely new, you need them. You need writers, you need narrative designers to be part of that process. On the other hand, if your format is strong, you don't need them in-house per se. I do a lot of work for companies who just basically outsource their writing to me, and I do it as a freelancer. And it's basically like, this is the gameplay format. This is exactly how we're building it from a narrative design point of view. And now we need you to just fill in the blanks. And if your format is strong, that's really easy to do for experienced writers. And going back to the content that you need, this is probably what you want to do, because you need a lot of that content. So having writers to outsource to and just say like, this is what we need from you, is like the best way to do it. If you have multiple writers, be clear on the style. Make sure that they're all doing the same thing. Um, Soft launch and test. This is like the most logical thing you would say. But on the other hand, if you are not used to making mobile free to play games, if this is the first time you're going to do it, you might forget about this. Soft launching and testing, especially in story driven free to play games, takes a long time. And often games will be soft launched in a couple of territories for months, if not like years, until it's viable enough. And the content is there to just put it out there for the rest of the world. So just take your time. During soft launch and testing, you can already earn money, which is a good thing. So don't worry about that. Get external advice about narrative design from an expert. Also, if you're doing this for the first time, you want to develop something like that, but you don't have a lot of narrative design experience, just get somebody to give you advice. You don't need to hire them full time. You can just do consultancy, get some insight in whether what you're doing makes sense. And then last point, pay your writers like you would pay your programmers. Writing is a skill. I'm just mentioning this because as a writer and narrative designer, this is something that is a misconception from the point of view of a lot of game developers who are not writers, and um, underestimate the writing. Like I started out with, content, you need a lot. There are a lot of people who don't realize that if you're a writer, that means that it's a skill and that it takes time as well. That's why I'm saying pay your writers like you would pay your programmers. It's basically the same. Um, so there is no need, especially if you're doing a story driven game, to underpay your writers just because you think it's bad. If you get good writers in there and you pay them properly, you will start earning money with your game a lot faster as well. So don't forget that there are people too who have their skills. That's all. That's quite fast. Crash course. So a lot of stuff in there. feel free to ask me questions now or later. This is all the places where you can reach me. I'll be here in the Discord a while as well. Um, this is just basically the basic things that I've tried to explain about. Like, if you're into mobile, free to play, if you're into story driven games, and you're not sure where to start, hopefully this was helpful. Um, like I said, feel free to reach out now or in the future anytime. I'm always happy to help out or give pointers or answer questions on the whole free to play mobile narrative design thing. And thank you for having me here. That's it.
All right.
Oh, sure.
All right. So I just want to say thanks again. That was pretty awesome, pretty informative. Um, so what we normally do at this point in time is that we have the text questions, the absentee question chat,
Hmm.
where we have everyone just post their questions,
Yep.
and you can just go through and answer them as you can. So, guys, if you want to do that, you can go ahead. Alternatively, as long as you don't talk over each other, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask the questions directly. Um,
Yeah, and I
so,
just I just to add, I just saw the question that I hadn't answered in the crash course chat, but I'll definitely answer that as well because there's more to say about that. So I will get to that.
all right. So, I'm seeing the questions come in. I think I'm just going to kick something off really quickly as a question.
Hmm.
Um, Regarding narrative games and dialogue, is there like a rule of thumb for like word count and like digestibility? I know that for mobile devices, you normally have a very small bit of real estate, and it always seems to be this little bit uh, of a nice edge where you don't want them tapping through the story rapidly, but you don't want to
Yep.
um, dump too much text on the screen. So I don't know if that's a fair question. That's something
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would like
yeah.
to know.
And it's an important one as well. I There isn't like one answer to that because it has to do with the format. Basically, there are obviously differences between the different games. Um, but I think a good rule of thumb is well, actually, if I'm still sharing my screen. I think if you see that image that's on there, ice cream stall, it says that's a game I've recently been working on that has cutscenes that are sort of a chapter by chapter Am I there again? I think somebody threw me out. Well, not you, but somebody on Discord. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yep.
Cool. I'm back. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll share this again so you can see. Yeah. So basically, there's I think there's two rules. One rule is just um, try it for yourself. Just write one part and see what happens. This image is, I think, a good example. When I was talking with the game designers about this game, I said like, okay, what's the maximum word count? And they were like, oh, you can just do anything. I was like, oh, I don't think so. Let's try it out. And so, well, I could see that if you do a chat like this, you can see we have a couple of there that's like 2.5 lines. It's like, okay, if we have 4 lines, that's the maximum because otherwise it will be too big on your screen. So let's keep it at that. So if you have text balloons like that, you can just see it. As far as tapping is concerned, usually I'd say in general, if you have like full scenes, like scenes that have a beginning and an end story wise, um, in general, somewhere between 10 and 15 dialogue lines max, which would mean 10 plus times tapping. Um, this is obviously there are examples where it's more and less and it works. But if you do more than that, people are definitely gonna push the skip button, even if your story is interesting, and that's just because they want to get back to playing as well. So yeah, that's sort of a in my experience a rule, but yeah, it's something to test out as soon as you can, even with just dummy text. You don't need a whole storyline, because it's it's not about the engagement of the story. In that case, it's just about how much tapping or how much reading can a player handle. Yeah.
I have a question. Um, what you think would be the most difficult challenge between writing for a mechanic versus writing for a plot in terms of free-to-play model games?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
What is the biggest challenge for writing for mechanics in terms of free-to-play versus writing for story or plot?
Right. Oh, that's a good question. um, I think that it's a good question and it's hard to answer. Actually, it's quite hard. I think it's um, I think like I mentioned before, if the gameplay in the gameplay loop is really clear, everything is easy to write. I would say. So in terms of mechanics, that would have no influence anymore on your story. Um, it's it's different from no, let me start that phrase again. I think the big difference, and this might not be the exact answer to your question, but hopefully it comes close. The big difference, I think, in writing free to play mobile storylines and narrative design for it, compared to, for instance, a let's say a AAA console game, is that the gameplay and the story are not one on one intertwined. You can sometimes have events in the gameplay that have to do with the storyline. Um, that sometimes happens, but in general, they're separate from each other. And that makes it slightly easier to write because most of the time you don't have to worry about those mechanics. You just have to worry about um, does my story fit. But like I said, even if you have a game mechanic that doesn't um, have storyline at all, you can still write a great story around it. Just don't try to make it fit. So that's very different from when you're doing, like, for instance, an action adventure game where everything that you're saying as a character in the story needs to relate to what you're doing. It's all about let's go left, let's go right. Okay, this is our main objective. This is what we have to do. So it's just one on one the same thing. The mechanics and the storyline are intertwined every moment. And in mobile free to play, they're separate, and that makes it a lot easier, and also a reason why you can sometimes outsource your writing. I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it's the best answer I have at this moment. And just before somebody else has a question, and I forget to get into the question that was in the crash course chat. just want to add to that because the question was, would you say it's viable to make a game with a long close story free to play, for example, if it has multiple parts? Yeah, I sort of just answered that with the three books company. That's right. Um, if you make a game with a long close story, even if it has multiple parts, um, I would say it has to be premium. You have to ask people to pay beforehand. It also depends on like what's a long closed story. I mean, how long is a long closed story? Like for instance, let's say Grey's Anatomy, the TV series, that's the hospital-based TV series. I think that's been going on for like 15 seasons, and I think that they're ending it now. And they'll probably have like a final season that sort of ties up all of the storylines. So that's a long, close storyline, but it went on for 15 seasons. So no, my best bet would be make sure that your story can always continue. It would be it from a financial point of view. It wouldn't be smart to do something else, I'd say. Just to add to that. So sorry about that. Any more questions?
Um, yeah, I have one more question, Morton, in terms of authenticity.
Mhm.
Um, how do you maintain a certain level of authenticity when you're dealing with like what would be the word I'm looking for? A popular design or a popular frame of structure for a free-to-play model game?
That's a really good question. I think that's something that a lot of developers and writers are struggling with. I can only answer that for me personally, but I think the most important thing to start out with is making sure you have an emotional connection with what you are making. Um, because I think that like making money and catering to your audience, but also staying true to your own ideas can definitely go together. I think just look at the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think that's a really great example of well, not all of the movies, but a lot of movies catering to a great audience, knowing what the audience want, but also having distinctive voices of directors in there. Um, if you're writing something, developing something that storyline wise or character wise speaks to you emotionally, you will be able to continue writing that and staying true to that, even if you have to cater to your audience. And the reason why that works is because most likely your audience will want the same things you want. So if you're writing like for instance if like I did a lot of hospital themed games. Well, a lot, well, two, still a lot. And which is great because I love that genre, and I've seen a lot of TV series about that as well. And so the reason I like it is also because I like the kind of storylines and the tropes that you have in there, and that doesn't mean that you have to copy paste them. You can think of your own storylines, but you know what is nice and fun about the genre, and that means that the people who will play your game will most likely like that as well. And if they want to go into a certain direction, you probably want that as well, or at least you understand why they want that. um, in my personal experience, there's always obviously tension between the audience and making money and staying true to what you're doing. I have the experience and know from a couple of colleagues as well that often that is not in the storyline per se, but more in the issues surrounding it. So, for instance, how are we enticing people to spend their money? Um, which, like I said, can be a bit of an ethical debate, and rightly so. It should be an ethical debate. Um, or, for instance, like user acquisition will say, like, this is the image we want to use for the App Store because we've tested it and we see that this image works better. Um, and you will sometimes dislike that because you're like, well, that's not what my game is about. I'm not sure if some of you have seen, like, sometimes you have those mobile ads of games where the ad is totally different from the actual game and the gameplay. Um, it's just sort of weird false advertising, but it works. Apparently, people who see those advertisements then download your game and like it and play it, even though it's totally different from the ad. So there's in that surrounding stuff. Sometimes it happens that there's things that you feel are not true to your heart anymore. But in general, as far as your authenticity and your relation to the audience is concerned, yeah, try to write stuff that you like and you love as well, and you and your audience will keep on finding each other in a lot of things. That's my experience. Great question, thanks.
Thank you for answering. That was really insightful.
I'm really sorry I missed the talk or stuff, but and is this going to be, like, was this recorded and will it be available?
Yeah, I think so. It's recorded, right? So feel free to to jump in and see the recording later. But great of you to jump in now. I saw your recording, so that was insightful as well.
The daylight savings also did not help with this.
No, I can imagine. I had to check as well because I'm in a different time zone as well. It's like, okay, am I still having the right time in my diary? Yeah. So, any other questions at this moment? Like I said, feel free to come back to me anytime later for anything.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. You guys, if you can raise your hand and ask and just say anything else. I see Alex has joined us. Let's go. Alex, pass speaker alone. Uh,
Well, the thing is, sorry, interruption. I have a ton of questions because I'm a writer as well, and I've been trying to develop for games for quite a long time. So, but it is way too much to ask. So I'll probably message you and see if I get any more pointers and tips. But one major thing that I will have to kind of talk about my experience about writing is really authenticity. I find it's really difficult to kind of create something or narrative that works mechanically for the game,
Mm-hmm.
but also staying authentic towards the kind of plot that I'm trying to develop for that game. And I have been getting huge blowbacks from it. So yeah, that is one of my hurdles at this point. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna ask you more questions. Just
Yeah, feel free to do that and reach out to me, and hopefully I can help you. I can understand that frustration. I obviously I don't know your exact situation. I can say, and maybe it will be helpful to others as well, is that I think this happens more often. I've seen people struggle with that, especially when sometimes you have, like, okay, this is what I want to tell, and is a gameplay mechanic I like, and then they don't fit together, and you don't you don't understand it, sometimes it's hard to see why it doesn't fit together. Eventually there is a mechanic for every story, and there is a story for every mechanic. It's just sometimes it's not the most obvious pairing, and that can make it difficult and sometimes frustrating. But don't stop trying that, because there definitely is a combination that will work for you eventually.
I am sorry, you said something just now and I was writing it down. There is a story for every mechanic, and every mechanic has a story.
Okay, any other questions? I think we're sort of wrapping up here, right?
Yeah, I think we are wrapping up right now. Um, who wants the floor for the final question? All right, I think that will be me then.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually having trouble logging. Trying to get my camera up. Just name again.
All right. From my side, my final question. Ooh, she's gone. Oh God. As I'm about to ask it.
I
All
can
right. So my question is my final question, and it is more of I'm not sure if you're necessarily able to answer it, but it's kind of piggybacking off of the whole word count structuring and guidance of players on a free-to-play title, specifically I'm thinking narrative games on mobile. Um, what's the most interesting narrative-driven game you've seen on mobile and have played on mobile?
Oh, it's a good question. Um, Let me think. Um, well,
I
there's
can't get floor.
yeah. Well, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's tons of great mobile games, but just trying to stay in the free to play kind of way, and the sort of things that we've been talking about. I think for me, one of the let's say the classics is June's Journey, um, which is a game that has been around for a couple of years now. Made by Wuga, a German company, and what really works, I think, for June's Journey is that it it tells a really emotional story that continues for a long time, even though when you start with the game, you don't realize, like, it feels like a premium game. It feels like there's going to be an end to the story. Um, Plus, it's a different gameplay mechanic that is less often used. It's um, hidden what's it called, hidden objects. Forgot the word object. Hidden object game, which used to be a really successful type of gameplay on PC years ago. um, then it went to mobile, and it's still a bit of a niche. Like, it's not a match three or whatever. But and to be honest, for me, it's one of the gameplay mechanics I like least to play. Um, but the way they use it is really smart. And yeah, I think that's, to me, that's an example of a really well done mobile free to play game with a great storyline that has proven be successful for years on end. Also, without pushing the player too much to spend loads of money, but still making money out of it. And like I said, I mean, I'm a bit biased because I've worked on it for a bit, but if you want to learn more about creative ways to tell a story in that free to play realm, then Delicious World is also a really good example, I think, of being able to mix up gameplay and story, and also 3D animations, but also flat animations, and again keeping that story going, making it more interesting than just a basic guiding storyline. So yeah, I would recommend that one as well.
All right. Okay, so I think we can officially wrap up now. Thank you for that answer. That was lovely. Thank you for the time. It meant a lot. And yeah, I'm pretty sure Guru will reach out to you with his 101 questions.
Feel
In
free.
particular, yeah, in particular, he has been really trying to figure out exactly how to navigate the game space from a narrative angle. And
Right.
in our discussions, his topics have been pretty meaty. So I hope that connection bears fruit. Other than that, I think we can just close out the meeting. I think we've used up enough of your time, and I just can't say thanks enough, really.
You're very welcome, and thank you all for having me here. And yeah, good luck in everything that you all do. Feel free to reach out wherever, and hopefully talk to you again sometime in the future.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.